Sometimes people get fulfillment for like a moment. Some people have fulfillment for years. When you get into this overdrive pattern, we actually become uncomfortable if we're not doing anything. Many people that are working in this overdrive state, we're running on anxious energy.
I'm picturing myself here in my home and, things I can control, but when you're in the workplace, how do we apply your strategies?
Our social networks are not as strong as they ought to be.
Yeah, we're more connected, but we're less connected.
I think one of the saddest parts about modern day is this lack of connection.
This episode feels like sitting down with your wisest girlfriend, the one who helps you step off that hamster wheel and find balance. Dr. Sabina Nagpal gets what it's like to juggle everything and still feel like something's missing. She will guide you with simple self-checks to shift your perspective and remind you that you're already enough, and show you how to thrive, not just survive. You'll learn how to uncover your superpower, create ease, and embrace being over constant doing. By the end, you'll feel lighter, grounded, and ready to live a truly meaningful life. I'm Dr. Beatrice Seguin, PhD, and you've landed on my podcast this time of the month, your trusty sidekick to the midlife roller coaster. I chat with experts digging into legit solutions for midlife hurdles, be it health or lifestyle. Ready for the ride? Dive into this time of the month. Subscribe and catch the latest episodes on our channel. Let's own this midlife magic together. Did you do all the right things? Went to school, built a career, built a family, checked all the boxes, yet you still find yourself at midlife feeling unfulfilled, empty, even resentful. Do you wonder why, despite your efforts, you haven't reached your full potential? Well, this is a big question. What's missing? To help us unpack this, we're joined by Dr. Sabina Nagpal, psychiatrist, psychotherapist, and founder of Radiate. It is an intentional approach that combines evidence-based mental health practices with spirit-nurturing techniques to improve health, well-being, and performance. So together, we will explore how to align the mind, body, and spirit. Thank you, Dr. Nagpal, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's so nice to be here.
So many of us have moments of feeling unfulfilled, and I want to read a statistic to you. According to a report from the Women's College Hospital and the Women's Age Lab, in 2023, 39% of Canadians 65 years of age and older reported feeling lonely at least some of the time. And based on the Canadian Social Survey, in addition, as many as 41% of Canadians aged 50 years old and older are socially isolated. And so that is what we want to focus on today. What's going on?
Yeah, we're in what I call almost a fulfillment crisis, if you will. It's a big range. There's people that are really on the not so nice end of the spectrum and unwell. And even those that are well are still feeling unfulfilled.
Yes.
Right? So that's why I say it's a crisis. I think what we talked about focusing on today was those that were kind of on the, functioning okay, but yet, as you said, feeling like they've done all the right things. They did everything everyone told them to do, and yet they're feeling this kind of lack of fulfillment, or they have health problems, or they're just sort of not feeling joy, clarity, ease, or they're not feeling like they're performing at their best. And I think what's happened in the world is we've sort of like lost the plot a bit, as you described. And I think this part of the loneliness is a big part of things, certainly. And we've been through the pandemic now. We've seen people sort of have to bolster themselves, bolster their resilience, et cetera. And we've done that. And yet still we're left on the other side feeling like there's something missing. And that's really how I got to this place of thinking about mental health from a different perspective. As a psychiatrist, I've worked with many individuals, and using a biological, psychological, social approach, which is sort of the best standard of care you can have in medicine. And I saw many people get well using these kind of both medicine and psychotherapy, all of these things. And yet, I found even though we could get to wellness, to get to thriving, to get to that next level of what we talked about, this kind of joy, clarity, and ease, or best health, or performance, something else needed to be integrated. And that's really what Radiate's about, as you brought up. It's this integration, it's rekindling our spirit. It's looking within again and trying to ignite that inner fire again and nourish it, that I think is really missing in our modern world.
Yeah, and I find in midlife, perimenopause, menopause, sandwich generation, all these things happening, not feeling well or that joy. There's a sense of loss of joy, and I think it's over. I don't know. It seems like a flimsy thing, but joy is quite essential to life, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you want to define to us first what it is to be healthy, your mental health?
Okay.
And then what is fulfillment truly?
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as a physician, I would say, we could talk about disease, like dis-ease, right? So that's kind of when people have mental ill health, they usually have symptoms that are stopping them from from fulfilling their life roles, right? So if you're unwell, it's usually leads to consequences about not being able to fulfill your personal obligations, being a mother, being a friend, being a daughter, or your work obligations or what have you. And that's when you're kind of sort of like not sort of functioning, really not kind of checking the boxes that you wanted to in terms of your roles. And then there's a line where we get to be able to do that, and yet we still feel unfulfilled, right? And so where health lies, I think, is a bit of a personal choice, because, the medical model would say you're healthy once you're functioning.
Yes.
But we all know there's more, right? We all know I mean, I shouldn't say we all know, but I know, and I think you know.
I would agree.
Yeah, that health encompasses other parts of us, right? It encompasses this kind of both sort of our physical biology, our mental state, our ability to find joy, our ability to find peace within, and having a social structure and a social network. And I would argue also a connection with our inner fire, right? That to me is like holistic health. I bring in fulfillment into that because I define fulfillment as sometimes people get fulfillment for like a moment, and some people have fulfillment for hours, and some people have fulfillment for years, not every minute of the day, but they sort of have periods of fulfillment. Or if you're like a monk, maybe you have fulfillment for years and you leave the world. But the way I define fulfillment for people that don't really even know what that tastes like, if you will, is, and we can do it if you want. So I usually say, think of a time, recall, and let's embody a time where you have felt like you were doing the right thing at the right time with the right people, and it felt like nothing else was needed. There was no other wants. It feels like you're in. Some people use the term flow for that, and flow is a useful terminology. But fulfillment also brings in that we're kind of aligned with our values as well. And so what I try to do is teach people to see what that feels like even for a moment. And then what we try to do is build in practices that help us have more and more of that in our lives.
Just you mentioning it and taking a pause to picture a time, the word alignment actually came to mind before you uttered it. So that's an exercise you do with people. I think I just got an image when you were saying that. So important to do so. An inner fire. Tell us more about reigniting an inner fire.
Yeah.
I think women don't allow themselves to do that.
Yeah. It's really difficult to look at your inner fire when you're so busy checking boxes, right? And so if it's okay, I'll introduce you a little bit to the model because I think it helps define this.
We'd love to hear your model, and I believe that's also shareable on your website.
Yes,
so we'll put a link to it as well.
Yeah, it's definitely shareable. So my company Radiate, we start with this foundational model, and I'll walk you through it in brief. And obviously, for the purpose of time, we won't do all of it, but I'll walk you through it in brief. So basically, it starts at wellness. So it starts at a period where someone doesn't have a mental illness, right? So, or they're having some level of function. And then there's 3 stages in the model. There's the overdrive, overachieving stage. That's the stage that most of us are in, where we're, as you described on the intro, where we're ticking boxes, we're sort of getting to the next goal. We keep on kind of looking for the next thing to do. We often get into a habit of achieving something and not even taking a moment to celebrate the win, and we're on to the next. Right? Because we don't have, we sort of lose our capacity to really relish what's in us and what's external to us. And we get into this pattern of what I call the do-be trade-off. So we value doing as everything, and being becomes almost irrelevant. And yes, society and our pressures of life require us to do things. That's obvious. And I think sometimes when we get into this overdrive pattern, we actually become uncomfortable if we're not doing anything. So it becomes a pattern. And that is commendable in a lot of ways. Usually the people that are in overdrive are the ones on the team that get all the work, that get everything done. They're the person that their family calls to organize all the parties and all those things, right? So it's sort of, when I say to people, it's not good or bad, it just is. And often it got you to where you wanted to be, or where you thought you wanted to be.
Yeah, yeah.
But then at some point, it's okay to pause and decide if this is still what you want. Because what I suggest in my model is that overdrive becomes a proxy for fulfillment. We think that we're fulfilled by achieving things, but there's always another thing to achieve.
Yeah, I think there's a concept that it's an external thing. To get fulfilled is you're taking something and putting it in a bucket.
Yeah,
Like
once I do
bucket.
this, once I have that, once I achieve this, once I publish my book, and it can be altruistic things even, right? Like once I've helped all of these people, once I've run this nonprofit, like it can be really positive things. It's not that this isn't a slight on those efforts. It's just about the pattern and recognizing the pattern. So that's the overdrive state. And then the next one is resilient but not fulfilled. So here you're less vulnerable, right? So you have the capacity to bounce back from adversity. In the overdrive state, you're actually quite fragile to burnout. You're like kind of, you can tinker to burnout pretty easily. In the resilient state, you have the capacity to bounce back from adversity. Maybe you've built in support. So, when you talked about the stat around people that feel very isolated, if you're resilient but not yet fulfilled, you sometimes have some social connections, you have people to go to, et cetera. So you're doing okay, and there's nothing wrong with being resilient and not fulfilled. It's totally fine. It's just that you're not at the kind of the next stage, which is where you have joy and clarity and ease. So you have this kind of well-being side to you. You have optimal health, right? So you don't have the that kind of risk of you decrease your risk of these kind of chronic health conditions that come from these other states, from the overdrive and this kind of resilient, not fulfilled state. And the other piece that's really great is you perform at your best. So people often are sometimes scared to get out of the overdrive state because they're worried that they won't be able to be as productive, or that they'll lose what they have, or it's the only state they've ever known.
Yeah.
But what I spend a lot of time trying to help people see, and eventually people buy in, is that in this fulfilled state, actually you perform better. Right? So all those gifts that you have inside of you actually are more free to be used in the fulfilled state. And there's neuroscience that backs this, right? So the idea is that when you're more in this fulfilled state, you can make better decisions, you can integrate your left brain and right brain better, you can balance competing priorities better, you can use your intuition, and all of these things are actually really needed to get to that next level of performance. A lot of leaders find this getting into the fulfilled state is the answer that they needed, because when you're just in like check this, check this, check this, check this, and you're everything to everyone, you're actually not leading in the way that you want to. And so learning how to get into this fulfilled state allows people to actually save more time, perform better. It's just the taking the leap.
How do you get there? How do you go from that first, I'm going to venture to say many of us are in that first.
Totally. Yeah.
So how do you recognize and get out of that onto the next level?
Good question. So recognize, good point. That's
Yeah.
exactly. So, sorry, and the last thing I want to say is that everyone moves through the states. Okay, so it's not like I'm fulfilled and I'm forever fulfilled,
Yes.
right? So we all move through the states, and that's why recognizing can be really helpful. And so what I do is I teach people to do a check-in. It's the first thing that we kind of do. Even before someone sees me, we do like there's like an online survey of a check-in. And that's actually available on my website as well for people to kind of learn to check in with themselves. And so I'll describe the check-in in a moment. But once you've checked in, then you're like, oh, this is the state I'm in. And now I have some control over what I want to do, right? So that I think is the first piece. In the check-in, what we do is we do a scan. So I break it down into, we look first at our bodies. So we do a body scan, then we do a brain scan, then we do a heart scan, and then we do a performance scan. And it's all laid out with kind of the questions. But in broad strokes, the body scan is looking at, what is my body telling me? Where am I feeling? Am I feeling tension? Where am I feeling tension? Why am I carrying all this right here? You know, all of us have these sort of patterns that we exactly tension, right? Jaw, for me, it's the jaw. Like
Yes.
I clench my jaw. But we all have it. And the more we are in the overdrive state, the more we do that. That's quite normal. Some people have pain, right? Or shocks that kind of go down.
Yeah.
People have various things, tiredness.
Tired is recurring. Yes.
Yeah, of course, right? So these are the things that kind of, we just want to check in. Where am I? It's not good or bad, it just is. You'll hear me say that a lot.
Okay.
So that's body, but the other part of our body that's really important is, what's my emotional state? So what's underneath this kind of anxious energy that I'm carrying? The energy that I use to perform or to get all these things done is sometimes what I call anxious energy. But what's underneath it? What are the emotions that are underneath it? So often it's grief, so often it's fear, often it's shame, right? Shame-based achievement, like, hello, medical school. That's sort of how one gets through medical school, because you don't want to be shamed, right? So these sort of feelings underneath grief are often driving some of this anxious energy. So part of our job is to just do a quick scan. What is my body saying? Okay. What are my emotions underneath? Again, not good or bad, just is, right? So that's the body. Then we do brain. What are my thoughts doing? So am I only thinking about things in the future?
Oh goodness, I think you're going to get a lot of raised hands on that one.
Right? And that's what anxiety
Tomorrow,
is.
in an hour, in 5 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. What's going to happen then? What I need, and really high performing people with that future thought, it comes about in being over prepared, right? So it's a good thing. It gets you where you want it to get, right? People love people that are over prepared. But if we get into this pattern of always preparing for what I have to do next, what's happening next, and we can never get into the present moment, then it's really difficult to get to fulfillment, right? Because we need like presence in the present. That's one of the things that I say. So what are my thoughts doing in terms of, are they always going to the future? Are they always going to the past? And what's the like quality of them? Are they like racing? Are they multi-directional? Or am I able to have like some like train of thought? So it's just noticing, right? And then the heart scan is like about relationships. So when I'm personally in overdrive state, everyone's doing everything wrong. No one has any capacity, right? I'm the only one who's able to do it. Like, you know, my poor husband, right?
That's relatable emotion.
Right? And so, like, if you're able to do the check-in and you're like, oh, I'm fighting with my husband, my kids can't get their shoes on fast enough, my boss is doing this, my mom needs it. It's like, okay, maybe there's something potentially going on with my state. It's just asking the question, right? So we look at our relationships and then our performance, which is, you know, individual, but like, am I able to, you know, lead the way that I want to lead, relate to people the way I want to, you know, make decisions the way people get into decision fatigue because their mind is not clear. So that's kind of the check-in. And then once we know where we are, then we can start to take action about what we want to do.
Okay, that's a great model and an exercise we all need to do. So once we've assessed, checked in, what's next?
Yeah, good question. So once we've checked in, we know we want to define what state are we in this moment, knowing that it could change. But in this moment, if we want to get out, what I do is I help people establish like what can they do to kind of like get out of the fire, right? So they're like approaching burnout, or they're in this kind of overdrive state that they can't get out of. So we create like a calm down routine. And that's kind of the acute management, get out of the fire. And then there's a longer term strategy when I work with people over months about like, how do we help someone to integrate practices in their life so that they don't keep getting into that state? So there's kind of like two roads, right? So on the short road, someone who's in the fire, the calm down routines, maybe I'll give you mine if that's okay.
Yeah, that's great, sure.
So if I know I'm in this like overdrive state, I do the check-in. For me, it's going to be like jaw, it's going to be like tension, it's irritability, it's everyone's doing everything wrong, and decision making. Like those are my like, okay, so I'm like, okay, Sabina, you're in the overdrive state. What are you going to do about it? So I use high yield self-care, and I use spirit nurturing practices. Okay, so high yield self-care for me is exercise. So usually something kind of like high intensity, like where I can like burn a bit of that energy.
Okay.
Because for me and for many people that are working in this overdrive state, we're running on anxious energy. And so what we want to do is burn it. Like our cortisol levels are high, our oxytocin levels are like really low. We want to like just like burn some of it off.
Okay.
So that might be a run, that might be a strength training, that might be a swim, but something where I need to kind of just like discharge.
Dance.
Good one. Yeah.
I do that
What kind
in
of
the
dance?
kitchen.
Yeah.
I'll put Enrique Iglesias on, and I will just dance with him.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well done. The other one I do is I sing in the car really loud.
Yes, loud music, singing in the car, that's a good
Yeah.
one.
So it's kind of like you basically are like, I see you energy and I'm going to dispel you. It just allows you to have a bit of control over what's going on with your state. And we all kind of work to find our place, but these are the ones that sort of like work for me. So this kind of dispel first.
I like the high yield self-care.
Yes.
That's an important distinction. Let's spend a little more time there explaining exactly what that is.
Sure.
Self-care is such a blanket statement.
Yes.
And it's also been co-opted by luxury.
Yes. Yes. So why I say high yield self-care is because we're busy people, and we can't do everything on the list that social media is asking us to do.
Yeah.
Right? It's like eat
Protein is a full-time job.
Exactly. Like eating everything right, and then like, taking 3 hours a day to meditate, and then exercising, and then all the things. It's like, they're all great. I'm not really actually saying that they're not useful, but no one has time to do them all. And so I think what I found is helpful is to help people figure out what are their high yield self-care activities. I usually focus on the top 5, which is, I use the acronym NEST also on my website. So nutrition is the N, exercise, sleep, time for stillness, and supports. So those are the top 5. But again, even trying to do all those 5 is pretty difficult, especially when you're in the fire that we're talking about. Like, I'm not gonna be able to do all that. So I've learned, like, I'm in the fire, what do I need to do that will work for me today, now? And so I help people do that first, because you need to sort of feel like, again, you have a sense that one of the chief factors around resilience is a sense of control.
Yes.
So feeling like you have control over your state is exceptionally important. And so, as I said, so for me, it would be high intensity exercise. For you, maybe it's dancing in the kitchen. For others, it might be, could be nutrition. For some people, it might be their most important thing. Like, I have clients that say, like, yeah, when I'm not at my best, I start I start like overeating, or, I have food cravings, and then I start to feel worse, and I tumble down, right? So for them, that might be the most important thing they have to do, more than the exercise in that moment, right? For some people, for everyone, sleep is medicine. That's actually accurate. And we all have a range. For some people, sleep is the most important thing. For some people, they can get away with a little less sleep. So it's about figuring out, and for those for listeners, you can just start trying each one and just see what are your results. And you can use the check-in. So here's my check-in, this is where I'm at, I'm gonna try this. Did it help, the check-in? No. Okay, let me try this. So then, you can self-experiment. So for me, it's the high intensity exercise first. It's usually singing also, and making sure that I get good sleep. So for me, it's exercise and sleep. And then I bring in the spirit nourishing practices. So the lowest hanging fruit, and one that I use really regularly, is getting into nature. Like there's very good evidence around kind of calming the brain down, inviting our parasympathetic nervous system to the party by getting into nature.
Touching grass and trees is a real...
Yeah, it's real.
There's real data for that,
Yep,
right?
yeah, exactly.
I have a curiosity question on that note.
Go for it.
Have you seen grounding sheets trending? Is that a thing?
No, tell me about it.
People are buying these grounding sheets that are supposed to mimic connecting to nature.
Oh, I
You don't know
see
much
these.
about that.
No,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm bad at social media,
no.
if I'm really honest. I haven't. I mean, the problem is the industry is so big.
Just go outside.
Just go outside. And even if you can't go outside, I mean, it's better to be outside.
Yeah.
But even what I usually suggest to people is observing nature. So even if we were here, just observing is really useful. And in a nature observation, which usually takes like 5 minutes, I think that's like the first entry level spirit nourishing that I usually suggest to people. So all you're doing is looking at something. So you're looking at, the water, and you're just watching the waves go. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to act in any way. And all you're doing is observing like from a distance. And why that's so important is because most of our lives we don't get to observe. We are always doing things. We're always fixing. We're always doing, always need to be responsible for what's in our proximity. When you observe nature, you're not responsible for it, and you're just observing it from a distance. And it's almost painful at first to spend 5 minutes looking at something without doing anything.
I feel guilty.
Yeah.
Like I should be vacuuming.
Totally. Yeah. You feel guilty, and it's a habit to do something. Right? Oh, I have to do that. Oh, I'm just going to send this email, and then I'll do this, right? So the discipline of just watching something and noticing, oh, look at the color of it. What's the smell? What's the, what's the movement? Like when it hits the rock, look how it turns white. Like those are the things that and it's just, like I said, 5 minutes is not too much to ask, but it really slows things down. So that would be like an example of a spirit nourishing practice. And then, I customize them for people, but as a shortcut, it's anything that kind of keeps you in the here and now, where you can kind of feel connected to your spirit. So the arts are also really useful. So singing, dancing, painting, drawing.
Meditative drawing. I know my daughter likes doing that.
Yeah. It's really, really helpful. And then we can go all the way, up to more intensive things like meditation, which, as people want to get into the fulfilled state kind of more regularly, it's a very useful strategy.
And where does religious spirituality play into this? It's part of the continuum that you include, tailor to your patients. Yeah.
Exactly. Like it's, if people have a religious background, super, that is something that they feel connected to, then that's a good channel for them to go on. If one doesn't have a religious background, it's all about that inner fire, right? That I believe, religious or not, everyone has. It's just part of us. And so learning how to connect to it, reignite it, and then nourish it. So these are kind of the practices that I teach as we go along. So in the fire, we do kind of the calm down routine, if you will. And then over the course of time, we integrate more and more of these practices so that they're kind of part of our life. But the important thing to note also in why my work, what I bring to it is all of my psychiatry background, is that I recognize that doing all these things is challenging. There's a reason why people don't do them. People want to feel better, right? It's not that they don't want to. And so we all have triggers and traps that hold us back from actually moving through the stages or from being able to integrate these practices.
Is that what you call blind spots? I think I saw.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
tell us
exactly.
More.
So we have blind spots that kind of hold us from being able to kind of do this more often or more effectively, more deeply, even though our best intentions are there. And so I've broken it down to try to simplify it. The top 3 blind spots that I find in kind of high-performing people or people that are kind of already well are unhelpful beliefs, repeating patterns of relationships, and emotional avoidance. So those 3 are the ones that we focus on in my work to help people see for themselves, understand, see how they're happening in real time, and start to just notice, oh, that's why I'm now back in overdrive, or that's why I kind of am like back to this like needing to check everything off because that person said that and it brought me. So we learn a lot about our triggers and our traps and these blind spots that keep us in this state despite our best efforts.
So that's really why it's useful to have that external view guiding you to identify the blind spots, because literally you don't see it.
Exactly. I mean, everyone can start by exploring it,
Yeah.
right? Certainly, but there's always some that are like a little bit more difficult to find.
What about the evidence for journaling? Because sometimes people think it's woo-woo, if I'm allowed to use that term.
Yeah.
But it sounds like some of what you're talking about would relate to journaling, but in a specific way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
do you
I
wanna
use
tell
journaling.
us more about that?
I think
Yeah.
journaling is really effective. I would put it in the category of the spirit nourishing practices. Again,
Okay.
it slows you down.
Yes.
It allows you to kind of like just connect with yourself. It's a way of kind of like looking inward, right? So all of those things are really useful. So I'd kind of put it in kind of in a very useful practice that way. It's also really helpful for that emotional avoidance. So if that's your blind spot or your trigger that kind of keeps you from progressing, if you will, journaling can be really helpful. Sometimes one of the exercises I often get people to do, actually I had a client recently that I asked to do this, is to write letters to people from their past, potentially. It's usually poor moms, but it's okay. But you don't have to send the letter, but it's sort of like, this is what I feel, this is what I wish I had, this is, this is what it's left me with.
Yeah.
But to really allow yourself to live the emotion of that, as angry as you want, as sad as you want. And sometimes we even start with we start with like, I love you because I H-word you, which I make my kids say, I hate you because, so you can get out some of that, that emotion. So journaling can be just free journaling, which I think is really useful, but also can be like directed journaling. And then the other part of journaling that I really like is a gratitude journal.
Right. I'm just thinking, I think I've heard of some people writing letters to themselves, their younger selves.
Yep.
Which sounds quite powerful.
Yeah, that's another one
As
we
an
do
exercise.
too.
Yeah.
Because it helps one recognize what they deserved to have had or what they were missing. So like when you write a letter to your younger self, you're as an adult, you can empathize with that younger self, and that younger self has the kind of opportunity to grieve and to feel the validation that maybe they missed at that time.
Dr. Nagpal, you're talking about all these strategies. I'm picturing myself here in my home and things I can control, but when you're in the workplace, does this apply? And how do we apply your strategies in that environment?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And often one of the reasons people might come to me. In the work environment as an individual, what I would say, based on what we've talked about already, is to keep that check-in handy, right? So I actually suggest people to do the check-in like 3 or 4 times a day. So you're always kind of aware of where you are. And so it could be when you fill your water bottle, it could be when you use the restroom, you just sort of create like some pattern where you always do it. So you always kind of know where you are. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, you can plan. You can plan like, actually, I know this member of my team seems to trigger me, or this member of my team, my direct report, maybe needs more of me, and I don't have that right now. So I'm gonna like do that meeting tomorrow or another day. Or you can anticipate. So I know I'm gonna have to do something.
So I'm gonna go stare out the window for a few minutes before the meeting.
Yeah, I'm gonna calm down. I'm in overdrive. I'm not gonna be able to support her. So I need to do my nature observation. I need to do a quick meditation. Maybe I'm gonna take a 5-minute walk around the parking lot before I do this. So that you have, again, it's a sense of control, right? Mm-hmm. You're gonna go into a big meeting where you know that everyone on that team is gonna, is also in overdrive.
They're all in fire mode.
Exactly. So you might need to bring, or not this like another task, but like, if you can come in a more fulfilled mindset, one, you'll be protected a little bit, and it changes the energy of the room.
Absolutely.
Right? I actually really love working with teams, working with leadership teams or small teams, so that they can see this, and then they can. So what we do is we first work on personal part, and then we work on organization, right? So what's happening in the organization? How do we bolster the resilience of the organization using these principles? What's the culture like, and how can we bolster the culture using these principles? So I call that kind of fulfilled leadership. And that program is so fun because if everyone's actually thinking about this stuff, then you can have conversations. I'm in overdrive right now. Actually, I can't take this on. And when it's not like you go from this pretend everything's wonderful to burnout. It's like there are stages in between, but we don't talk about them. So in the workplace, my grand vision is that this becomes part of the workplace.
Part of training, part of team building,
Yeah.
Layer in midlife, perimenopause, menopause. How does that all factor in? Because I want to bring it back to your mind, body, and spirit.
Right. Yeah, I'm happy to. So I'm going to go to like the medical model again and then bring in how Radiate comes in, because perimenopause, or any period of a woman's reproductive life, whether that's pregnancy, postpartum, around your menstrual cycle, or perimenopause, menopause, we have an interaction between our mental state and our hormones. That's sort of part of what I do that's what my medical practice is actually about, working with kind of hormones and how they impact our mental health. So what we know is that we have a change in our mental state, whether it makes us unwell or just not at our best, in these periods of time. And that's for biological reasons, that's for psychological reasons, and that's for social reasons. And then I'll bring in the spiritual as well, which is which Radiate brings in. So we know from a biological perspective, and I know that a lot of your listeners are sort of pretty in tune with that. But basically, as our hormones change, we have real changes to our capacities in terms of regulation of our emotion, in terms of capacity for cognition, in terms of our overall kind of mind-brain connection. So those are all real changes that we deal with, in addition to sleep changes, right? So all of the biological parts of perimenopause impact our state, right? So perimenopause in itself could lead someone to go from a more fulfilled kind of resting state, if you are a more resilient resting state, to burnout, right? That in and itself. That's the biological. But there's also the psychological and the social pieces that come in this time. So the psychological pieces are, we're at a different phase of our life. There's often grief that comes with that. There's a lot of grief around, kids growing, or role changes at work, or parents aging. There's so many triggers at this time.
So many.
Just just a few to name. Let alone, physical, sometimes our bodies are not cooperating with us anymore. So the psychological impact of that, I've always been healthy.
Yes.
And now that's a big, there's grief around that.
And fear, going back to that state of whether it's called fulfillment or leadership, but you're struggling with all these things and you're afraid you'll be found out, so to speak. I hear that a lot from community members. Like, I'm a top sales executive and I can't remember 2 words now in the board meeting. And so now that creates anxiety around that, and back to fire mode, now that you've taught us that word, or that first state.
Yes, absolutely. You get into this overdrive because you feel this pressure to perform, because there's an internal doubt, there's internal fear, internal shame, all of those emotions that suck us back, right? And so, like, understanding those sort of psychological blind spots or psychological traps, maybe we're not blind to them, but they're just still hard to manage, is really important in this phase of life. And once we can learn to process some of those feelings, when we kind of get out of that emotional avoidance piece, then it doesn't have to, when we're a little bit more free from it, it doesn't have to pull us back all the time. And then there's a lot of relational psychological stressors, right? It's a hard time for relationships, this kind of midlife. And I know you've had a lot of guests talk about relationships here, like on the show. But certainly, those that are married or those that are kind of, in partnerships, it's a tricky time for many, many reasons. And then socially, right? Our social networks are not as strong as they ought to be, right? As you talked about at the beginning of the show, the stat, like...
Yeah, we're more connected, but we're less connected. right? We're connected this way, but not.
We're so disconnected.
Really, yeah.
We really are.
Yeah.
I think one of the saddest parts about modern day is this lack of connection. And I think that it's probably, I was at a talk recently for my kids, and what the speaker had talked about kind of how technology is kind of like the biggest risk for kids around social connection, right? It's just so hard to have a real connection through tech. And I think people are feeling the effects of that across the board.
Across the board.
But in any transition, we are aggravated. These factors are kind of aggravated, right? So if we have a bit of a paucity of a social network, it's going to be aggravated in this period of time because maybe we don't feel like okay to ask people for help, or we sort of don't have. It takes courage to ask people to kind of get into supporting us.
And it takes courage to admit to certain things. I've written and talked about the fact that hormone therapy, and for our listeners, we have entire episodes dedicated to that. But there is a link again, the biology and the mental state. Hormone therapy or other prescription therapies can alleviate symptoms, but they're not enough.
Yeah,
they're not enough, and so that connection and everything you've talked about with this phase of life. How do you help your clients, patients, and our audience through this realization that take care of your symptoms, but there is this psychological piece to menopause. There really is.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And when I talked earlier about those blind spots, one of them is this repeating patterns of relationships. Yeah. So what that in short form is that we all have a way of connecting to people, of attaching to people, of getting our psychological needs met. That's formed between the age of 6 months and 2 years. Like it's an inner working model that we just continue to repeat. And we all have it, whether we're functioning or not. We have a way that we lean, the way that we kind of go. And when we're in stress, or a transition like perimenopause, some of those patterns that maybe don't serve us in the best way come back about. So maybe we've learned, maybe in our 20s we were kind of maybe not as good at getting our psychological needs met, and then we grew and we worked on it, and then we get to perimenopause, and all of a sudden we're like, but I already fixed that, why is it back? But it's normal for it to come back. It's just about learning that pattern and understanding, oh, there it is, yes. So for me, if I'm under stress, I'm like, get out of my way, I just want to do everything alone, do not, again, this whole no one has capacity problem. That is my default in the time of stress. Other people have other defaults. So I need to see that because I'm like, oh, I didn't get enough sleep because I'm perimenopausal. I didn't get enough sleep. My emotions are all over the place, X, Y, Z. And so therefore, this pattern's going to come out. Oh, there it is. Oh, that's why I'm doing that. So I help people to see what is this kind of pattern in their relationship that maybe they can alter at this stage, or maybe they need to do that work again, and that's okay. That's life's journey. So I help people to see that it's quite normal for that to happen in the context of a transition. And if you work through it together, you can alter it and get the support you need.
And it's not hopeless.
It's not.
It's not hopeless.
Yeah.
We can find our inner fire and our joy.
Yes, that's the key.
3 takeaways for our listener.
One is the check-in, get to know yourself. You're beautiful, get to know yourself. Whatever's there is not good or bad, it just is, but knowing it gives you kind of a sense of power. Second, I'd say you've probably done enough in your life. So it's try to get to where this idea of I am enough, I do enough, and I live in abundance, and the rest is kind of just extra, right? So try to switch that do for a little bit of be, right? So it's okay if I just be.
Yes.
And then the third is, I'd say, the more you can feel, I don't think that fulfillment is selfish, because actually, one of the reasons I do this work, if I'm really honest, is because I believe if more people could operate from fulfillment, most of these difficulties in the world could be solved. So, I really just encourage people to try it out and find that superpower inside them so that they can, contribute in whatever way makes sense for them. Because I think the contribution will be greater than the checklist.
supports her beautiful messages? What makes you feel beautiful?
I feel beautiful when I connect to beauty. Like when I feel connected to beauty, so that can be in nature, that can be like a nice chat like this, where I feel like there's like real exchange of energy. It can be with my kids that look, but it's when I feel connected to beauty that I can sort of embody it.
So this is completely unrelated, but because of your training in the biomedical, psychiatry model, but with that psychotherapy and spiritual side to things, one thing that I've been fascinated with is my signature question, what makes you feel beautiful, is a very difficult question to answer for most women. Mm-hmm. It's either that I shouldn't even be allowed to feel beautiful is what I get. It's me paraphrasing the energy that I get from certain people. Or if I do feel beautiful, I have to make sure it's kind of toned down, mm-hmm. right? Like what's appropriate to say kind of thing. So I'm curious about why that is from your perspective, and how we help women see that they're beautiful and that they're enough.
Yeah, it's a really nice question. I really like it. Even when you asked me the question, I was like, what does make me feel, if I'm honest, right? Because I think partly like as little girls, we're like sort of trained in a way, like we have a strange relationship with beauty, right? Like, and you're either like too into it or you're like, no, like I was a tomboy and that was my thing. So I didn't care about beauty. But then why can't I care about beauty and be athletic? Like, so I think it has
and
to do.
Smart.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Here's a thought.
Yeah. So I think it comes from this like historic way that we are taught about beauty. And then of course, obviously media and like all the kind of bars that we set mm-hmm. for beauty. And we don't want to appear like we're pretending to be a supermodel or something. I think there's all this kind of like stigma around that. I think there's hope in that I think people are starting to see the idea of inner beauty a little bit more. I think that, to me, that's the angle, right? It's like the angle meaning like, how do we help with this problem is like that we sort of try to help women see that beauty is an internal phenomenon and that the world has made it maybe external, but it actually truly is an internal phenomenon. Because your question is appropriate. How do you feel beautiful?
Yeah, it's purposeful, not look beautiful.
Yes.
It's feel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the feel is internal, right? There doesn't need to be a mirror, right? It's just like an internal feeling. So I think it's teaching about like, I think it actually, as you're asking me, I think it's actually related to this fulfillment piece, right? Because the more fulfilled you feel, the more beautiful you feel, right? So if your fire is ignited, I mean, what's more beautiful than that?
I can't think of anything more beautiful. We feel your energy. We thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to go do that homework. I'm going to go and do your exercise.
Good.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Women Living Deliciously by Florence Given. This is a quick love letter to yourself. Just looking at it brings me joy. This is a very bold and unapologetic guide to owning your desires and shedding society's tired scripts about who you should be. Her chapter on letting go of people-pleasing, it's a revelation. She writes, "Your freedom will always upset someone." And I felt that in my bones. It's a spicy book, it's empowering, and it's the perfect kickstart if you're ready to put yourself first for a change. If you're navigating midlife and you're craving a little bit of sass with your self-discovery, this book is your permission slip to live deliciously.
Thanks for listening today. This podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only. The content shared here should not be considered professional medical advice. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider for personalized medical guidance. We're here to empower and support you, but your health decisions should be made with your own medical team. Until next time, take care and keep thriving.